I'm delighted to be joined by Tim Spector, the creator of the rather brilliant Zoe app, which has been monitoring the symptoms of millions of us and provided, really incredibly useful data on the progress of this awful virus. Tim, great to see you. Just looking at your latest data, where do you think we'll inevitably be in Tier 3?
I can't predict what the government's going to do, but our data is actually quite different to probably what the government's using. And so I fear that the government will be using rather outdated data to make their predictions, because our data from the app is showing that virtually all the regions in the country, broken into large NHS regions, have actually been decreasing in the last week, or flat. So no region is really increasing anymore. And these are the new symptomatic cases, which then feed on into hospital admissions and also then feed on into ITU, etc., several weeks along. So we're very much the early radar of what's going on. And we're also looking at the age over 60, which the government quite rightly has highlighted as one of the key parameters that's going to put pressure on the NHS, because it shouldn't matter too much how much infection is going on in younger people, because that doesn't really hit the NHS, but the over 60s is an important indicator. And according to our data, no large region of the country is going up in that direction. So it's all coming down in the right direction, although it's coming down slowly, with our values only just below 1. So I would pick tiers very different to probably what the government would do. And I think they'll be looking at some of their models, as they did when we went into lockdown, from a different viewpoint. And I think that's why I think they got lockdown 2 wrong. And the tier system, as it was working pretty well, and rates were generally coming down before the tightened restrictions. So I
just want to ask you about that. I think you're broadly saying that actually if they'd stuck to the original tier system, we would still be seeing declining case rates. So I think your view is, and you weren't somebody who was really ever a sceptic about regulation to deal with this, your view would be the lockdown was over the top.
Yes, and I was absolutely for the first lockdown, but looking at the data and seeing what we can see in this app in nearly real time, we're just getting it about 4 days later so 4 days before, we can really see these patterns emerging every day, and that's what we do on the app, and anyone can see those transparently. And it's obvious that most of the bad areas, the northwest, the northeast, particular, had already started to come down quite majorly before the increased restrictions, and it didn't make any difference to the rate. So in none of the areas did the rate come down faster after the lockdown than before. So I think we are seeing that the voluntary restrictions are actually working better than some of these more strict mandatory ones. And we know that the government's own data is showing that compliance actually drops, strangely, the tougher the restrictions there are, particularly on the way down.
So can I just ask you, I hear what you say, that you, on the whole, think that maybe, if you were designing it, you wouldn't put any large area into the absolutely highest band of restrictions, Tier 3 now. But people at home know, because the Prime Minister said there are going to be some areas in Tier 3. And I think they'll want some guidance from you about where you think, whether or not the Prime Minister's right about this, where you think those Tier 3 regions will be.
Well, I think the criteria are becoming clearer, that it's not just about the direction of where the cases are going. It's not just about the numbers over 60. It's also the capacity of the NHS in that particular area.
Yeah.
And so we should be looking at the trusts in particular that are having extremely high rates of admissions and look like they're not going to be able to cope unless the rates are brought down fast. And so there will be areas in the country that are in those criteria. So I'm not saying there'll be no areas of tier 3 restrictions. I think there are at least 20 trusts around the country, according to the latest data, that are having very high admission rates and have very few beds. But overall, most parts of the country are not in that particular state at the moment. So I think we need to balance all these factors, the numbers of cases, the numbers over 60, the number of beds available and the number of admissions. And if we put that as a dashboard across every region and told people these are the criteria that if we lose the plot, you're going to go up a tier, and if we get it down, you come down a tier, I think people will be much more compliant with some of these regulations if it's obvious what's happening. And I think the main problem is people don't understand. And
we're almost out of time, I'm afraid, Tim, but just finally, you are obviously a bit more optimistic about what's happening than the government is. Would you have relaxed Christmas a bit more than they've done?
I would have probably done that by area more. I think the whole, there are local problems, and I still think we do need to be careful at Christmas, but I don't believe this one day of Christmas is 5 days of paying later. I think that was a made-up statement without any basis to it, but we all should be careful at Christmas. It's just one day, and we've got 3 more months probably before we get the help from the vaccine. So I think the idea is we should spread out the pain a little bit more and all behave responsibly and give people the data they need to make these choices themselves.
Great to see you, Tim. Thanks so much for joining us.